we pay attention to the whole notion of rules for negotiation and not let it come down. You were saying, David, that there is a lot of debate and there's a lot of argument. Is there a difference between negotiation so that all take win and individuals fighting up to make sure that I get out on top, right? So I just want to stop that. And yes, you.
You want to respond to it? No, I want to say to David two things, make it very brief. You haven't discussed, you talked about the MSJ and the trade unions and the mandate that MSJ got. You haven't discussed the nexus between the MSJ and the members of the partnership and the nexus between the partnership as political entities and the government. And I think those are the missing links. And those are the things that tell us we have not learned, as we listen to the inquiry, we haven't learned from 1986, 87. And in fact, it may even be less articulated than it was then. So the question is, are we going forward or backward? And it would seem not even forward, but a little backward.
Okay,
no, but we need to move on.
Yes, I'm going to just last comment, right? And I had it noted down, Suniti, because you did ask me, you did raise the issue when the discussion was, when I chaired the group of the party chairman, and you said you were surprised that the report is going back to the political leaders. And essentially, this is what it's about. And that's also what OLBC is raising. Let me just say that you're right. There was, and OLBC is right, there was no process set up within the partnership outside of government for the parties to engage. There is no, at the moment, formal process. And that is what the meeting a couple of weeks ago was to address. How do we, as parties in a partnership outside the framework of government, establish those mechanisms for that process of negotiation, engagement, and so on. And it is that now which we are working on, and I'll just leave it like that. It was recognized by everyone that that was something missing. We just couldn't do it before May 24th, as the reality. We just couldn't do it before May 24th. It should have been done, I think everybody recognizes, earlier, and people could make the criticisms of why it wasn't done earlier, and we'll just have to accept those criticisms, because it should have been done before now, but it is being addressed now. Hopefully, let us see what comes out of it. I'm not going to say anything more than that. If it doesn't work, then we will have to have this discussion again. If it does begin to work, imperfectly or perfectly, then we will continue to discuss to the extent to which it was imperfect or perfect. And if it doesn't happen at all, then I certainly will have to say something separately at that point in time. But that is what we're trying to put in. That was what the meeting of the party chairman was about, to try to put in place some kind of process that would address the concerns that both you and OLBC have identified.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think people discover people who hold public office, popular public office, which is to say public office to which they are voted into, discover the interests they have to serve only when they get in office. That's what happens. I think that is the phenomenon that exists in Trinidad and Tobago. People don't come and seek prominence or high office by articulating the interests they want to serve. So did you talk about politics as private initiative for public purpose? But I think it is the clear articulation of interest. Did you say that? It is the clear, that is what we've not been having in Trinidad and Tobago. People want office. And they want it on the basis of the CV, the PhDs, the entitlement. Never on a project. I remember the late Alan Harris tapped him and used to say, the Independence Project is floundered, you know. He said, the project that Williams embarked upon has gone astray, and that we have to re-resurrect it and so on. Williams never gave detail in those projects, and I think we had to flesh it out and so on. And I think the reason why that is so is because the role of the press plays in it. They allow people to run wild over the hopes of the country. Nobody come to somebody seeking office. None of the press and said, "What is your, where do you stand?" and so and so. What is your policy for the country and so on, right? Even in Tobago, there are some people who naturally have interest. Even in Tobago, where the interest is clearly pronounced and so on, and people should know what the interest is, the leaders should know that that doesn't happen. In Tobago, they exploit, right, the interest that Tobagonians have in a particular space in this republic called Trinidad and Tobago. They exploit that to get into office, but they're not clear about how they should preserve this and serve these interests and so on. So I think that the press has a role to play. We have to stop allowing people to run wild. We have to circumscribe them properly. Where do you stand on this? Do you have a project? How would you solve the problem and so on, right? And so this business about a court of policy cannot get any real traction in the parties because they are not people with projects. The leaders have no projects for the country. If they have projects for the country, articulated projects for the country, right, then they will have to reconcile them. All the leaders, because you want one project for the countries, all the leaders will have to get together and reconcile their differences, how their different projects conflict with the other. They don't have it, right? So it's a completely different thing. Now, I want to say one more thing before I close. This is the best CRF meeting I've ever come to. And I think we could say, we could give a credit to Suniti, but I think the initial credit has to do with the organizers of this meeting. From the very tone of the letter, of the invitation, you could see that they wanted a discussion on politics. We hadn't had that in the CRF. I think we have to say that. I have come to many CRF meetings. Even the crisis that promoted the CRF, right, didn't trigger a discussion. Dennis has it there, the clash between the executive, between Pandey and Robinson. They never discussed it in the CRF. All they said that this is a constitutional crisis. And they began to discuss constitutional reform as a series of proposals, local government and this and that, and never of the issue. Never. You had to force it. And if you stand up to talk about the politics, you're imposing, you are in position. You look like that unless you had the authority that you could force. I saw Best did it once. Once I come to a meeting and discuss the state of the country, Best was did. Because he had the moral authority to stand up and insist on a different thing. And he did it coming from the floor and so on. But we never had it in here. And I want to congratulate the new management in the CRF in the way they have taken this sharp turn to the state of the country. The second thing is that this issue of constitution reform is not so much about reforming the arithmetic of the Constitution, the details, the proposals, and so on, right? It really is about getting the country to talk about itself, to talk about the Indian Independence Project, for instance, to talk about all the issues. You have these politicians running wild. And I remember the elections of May last year, how you call it, brought to an end the exercise in constitutional reform that Mr. Manning conducted. And when Manning declared the election, I participated in that exercise. The question was, what would we do with this exercise? Should Gandhi call it off? Should he suspend it? And so on. And I argued then that he should let it run alongside the elections. Because at the constitutional reform exercise, we will raise the issue about the state of the country. And simply by doing that at such an exercise, which had the head of the country, it had publicity, it had the press and so on, and live on TV and so on, it could have forced the politician to stop simply talking about all kind of things, corruption, and who thief this, and who thief that, and who built chapel, and who all kind of thing, except about the state of the country. So I think what the CRF got to do this wrong is to get the country to talk about itself. And within there will be proposals, precise proposals about how it can solve the problems, but simply to talk. And you could have from that exercise a clear articulation of interest, right? So to give an example, what's the man name in the PSA? I was trying to find out his name. Rennie in 1986. He only knew the interests he had to speak for in this party that he joined, right? When the government got into office and they started to affect his interests, and he probably even knew those was his interests, is when his members take in tail. Then he realized that. Then he realized what his real interests were. It may have led him to suicide. Right? So the point is, that may be an exaggeration. I'll take it back any day. But that is what we got to do. We got to articulate interest. And I think we've made a very good start here today by simply talking in the way we have done.
Okay. I see two people. No, it is not you.
Yes, good morning.
The guest first.
Okay, good morning. Okay, I am happy that the speaker before me touched on that issue. The name is Roseanne Walker. Because I was motivated to come here, not just because of the invitation, but because of the article that was linked to the invitation, which is, and so what if Jack walked? And what impressed me about what Suniti had to say in that article was the idea of unpreparedness for public office. Now, brothers and sisters, I think that is a very important and fundamental point. And when we're talking about the failures of the education system, that is something we have to look at. I think somebody mentioned it this morning. Who is a citizen? But this idea about unpreparedness has to take us back to what is happening in terms of our higher education system in this country. And I am categorically making a statement about UTT versus UWI. Clearly, UWI has, quote unquote, failed in the sense that it has produced leaders who demonstrate this high level of unpreparedness. Which brings me, therefore, to UTT and what the current chairman is saying. I want to believe that when Professor Ramchan is speaking about the indigenization of teaching at UTT, he is really speaking about things like this, about preparing citizens for the mantle of political leadership, economic leadership, as the case might be. Some people may trivialize that and say, well, we used to have civics and teach that, but it's more than that. And I think that is where these type of discussions could lead somewhere. I think people have to come to the sense of, one, what it means to be human, and coming out from what it means to be human, therefore, what it means to be a citizen, and what do we need in Trinidad and Tobago to be able to assume political leadership and to take part in what is happening in the country with intelligence, with a certain level of political intelligence. The political intelligence so far has been limited to the party you support and what the party says, but not the type of discussion I want to believe this type of forum wants to initiate. The second thing I want to raise relative to that, therefore, is the language of the discourse. Now, a coalition cannot be a partnership. I'm very sorry. A partnership means we are all partners in the thing, so therefore there's no, there's no central leader. We come together. The very word partnership suggests that we are equal people at the table discussing ideas and moving forward together. Coalition, it seems to me, suggests that we have come together and therefore we're going to put this one thing as a central thing. Okay? And to me, this is where also our country and the education system has failed us in terms of language. We are not people who have been trained to really get into the nuances of language. So we deal with everything very superficially and we never get to what is really said under the meaning. We teach argument in school. We do not teach the children how to really register and recognize flawed thinking. And I want to believe a very skillful example of that was when the whole idea of the lack of qualifications of the young lady suddenly became discrimination against her age and gender. Now, talk about a good example of a red herring or a good example of evading the issue. But our people seem to not really get that kind of thing. So whenever we talk